Hello, I'm here with Kelly Moore. Kelly is a psychotherapist with JFCS. How you doing today, Kelly?
Doing great. How are you?
Living the dream, living the COVID dream, right?
Yeah, we did say that.
Now, Kelly, I know that you are an experienced psychotherapist, but you just started working with JFCS, a new job, really, in the middle of the pandemic. And then at the same time, you had to switch doing psychotherapy from normal person to person in the same room therapy to doing virtual psychotherapy, teletherapy. What have you learned about yourself from taking on these two new challenges during such a stressful time during the pandemic?
Yeah, it has been really tricky. So I have learned one of the biggest things that I miss is just going into the office and saying and having conversation with, from the front door secretary to all of my coworkers. And so for me, human connectedness and human connection has been my biggest misser in everything, if that's a word. And so I need to call my coworkers and have conversation throughout the day. So that's been quite helpful, but it is kind of weird to be on Zoom calls at times with people and be like, "Hey, I've never met you. I've been here for almost a year. What is your name again?" So it's been interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to create relationships and connections virtually. Now, you are a mental health professional, but you are also a human being. So as such, what have you found helpful for yourself that other people might find helpful in their coping as this pandemic continues to drag on?
For me personally, I really have tried a variation of things. Things have failed for me that hasn't worked and things have stuck. So, right, I've gone through the COVID buffet essentially of cleaning, going for walks, purging. But what I have been consistent in is art making and creating. So even within that, I've found variety. So I've gone through collaging, I've gone through decoupage, I've done watercolor, acrylic, stitching, embroidery work. So just switching it up all the time, but I always come back to art.
So it sounds like art is not only a modality that you use for therapy, but it's also a personal passion of yours. Curious, what got you interested in art in the first place?
I have always been into art since being a kid. It's just been something that was fostered within me as a child. All of my grandmothers and great aunts have had their own knack in art making, and even my father and uncles. So yeah.
You come from an artistic family.
A bit.
Well, speaking of art, one of the things that you've started doing with Angelica Miskanin is running art therapy groups for JFCS staff, but also for community members. What have you liked about being able to lead these groups?
That's my greatest joy right now at work, honestly. So I look forward to those groups every time they're on my calendar. So again, as I've already stated, just connecting with other people is my biggest joy. And so of course I like meeting with my clients, but that's very one-on-one, and that can be really intimate and challenging at times, right? So that would be more helpful in, a private setting in a room. Whereas being in a group setting, that almost feels like it comes more to life on a screen. And so you feel more surrounded by people. And, we just had a group last night where everybody in the group came in and we check in with people creatively and we say, "How are you today?" And then use a metaphor. And last night we said, "How are you based on the temperature?" And everybody said well, it was this, but even getting on the call, my temperature is raised a little bit. And they just talk about the environment in there just having a vibe. And I totally agree. I always enjoy just the sense of community within those groups.
That's really interesting because I think most of us think about therapy, whether it's art therapy or talk therapy, we think about it as a very sort of individualized experience. And with your art therapy groups, it sounds like not only is it therapeutic, but it's also a social experience, a way of connecting with other people.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest perks that's happening right now, is that like even the group members, really look out for each other and are supportive. So it's quite beautiful in what I experience.
It seems like there are some beautiful things that are happening during this pandemic, but of course, there's lots of terrible things that are happening also. And I found that when we face challenging situations in general in life, as challenging as they might be and as terrible as they might be in the moment, there's often things looking back that we can say we learned from that situation. And I'm wondering, what are some ways in which many of us might have actually grown during the pandemic? I mean, is there anything positive that we'll be able to take away from this experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, being a clinician, I've heard examples from many people, and I've also heard many struggles, right? So I can speak to both. And for myself personally, I have always identified as being an extrovert. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I really struggled. But I have recognized, for me, this time of, really slowing down and really checking in with myself a lot more and having more alone time has really been beneficial. So just recognizing different things about myself, I think, has been helpful in what I would recognize as a plus to the pandemic for me.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes when we are stuck in these four walls so much of our days for so many months, it is a good time to check in and be introspective, maybe more than we normally are, because we don't have all those external distractions and demands pulling at us. So yeah, maybe that is something that a lot of us can take, and maybe we won't even realize it until after the pandemic has ended, whenever or whatever that means. Being able to look back and say, wow, I'm a little bit of a different person, and maybe in a positive way than I was before the pandemic.
Yeah, maybe. Hope so. Something.
Yeah. Well, it's great talking with you today. Thanks for joining me for this.
Yeah.
And we'll talk again soon.
Indeed. Thanks for having me, Jordan.